Well, let's go ahead and get started. So we are stepping into a new week, and we're in March, believe it or not. So before we get into what we're talking about today, which is assumptions and limiting beliefs, week 13, just wanted to check in with you guys. How did your reminders work for you this past week, if you set one, or what other questions do you have about setting reminders? Just kind of a check-in on last week. All right, who will volunteer to go first? All right, Lori, how about you? Is it easier if I just unmute you?
Yeah, because I can't reach it.
Okay, just raise your hand when you want me to unmute you, and I'll unmute you.
Okay, that would be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I used it this week. Andrea had working with her was great, and it came up with one that was really very impactful. And I would say that when I used it this week was more when I wasn't feeling it. So to remind myself of where I want to be. Didn't really have opportunities to use it to reinforce because I wasn't really in that place, but I really like it. It was very helpful having that visual. It reminded me a lot of the vision thing, but I guess not as specific goal related. It was more just, mindset. I liked it.
Yeah, so it reminded you of that certain mindset or perspective. Very cool. Paul, did you add a new one in, or did you just keep doing whatever you already do as far as reminders?
Oh, yeah, I do. Stuart and I had this interesting conversation, and I really wanted to try out a kind of a image of being soil, right? Just brown and accepting of everything. And he threw in there, what about seed? I was like, dang, that's brilliant in its own way, and it has potential. So I never really landed on either one of those. I just thought sometimes it almost felt like some sort of parable. You need to be soil, you need to be seed at times, and then I thought yin yang and all kinds of things. So it really didn't help me come up with some central thing other than a nice philosophy for life. So I don't have a lot more to say about the whole dropping of anchors other than I know that I get into a mindfulness state through meditation, and when I wake up every morning, and I know that it carries for me some strength during the day, kind of on its own, without me calling forth its anchor. So, I guess I'm out on this one without much of a clue as to how we should do it this way. But yeah.
Yeah, because you already had a pretty set, established routine.
Yeah, I know. Once I do this with somebody, because my kid that I'm working with is just wanted a serious amount of college work this time, and I didn't even coach. I just counseled him about what to do. So I didn't feel like dropping an anchor about all those things that were school related. I wanted it to be sort of value or emotion or something different.
Or
right?
mindset, something beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, just move on for me. I'm done right now. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you all.
We can just say you reflected versus setting a reminder. There we go.
Right.
Exactly. Stuart, what about you?
Yeah, I actually, I didn't remember that I had a reminder, but then I did remember my conversation with Paul, and I actually found myself, and I was trying to remind myself to be present and to feel sort of the feelings in my body and have that awareness. And I did a lot of that, not remembering that that was the thing that I was supposed to be reminding myself of. But I've actually gotten to the point where I'm going to ask my my boss, like, because I work from 9 to 4, and it's a lot of time, like nonstop time with teams. If I can just step out for 20 minutes just to meditate and just let her know I'm going to do that. So it sort of worked its way into my life without me consciously thinking about it, which is pretty cool.
Oh, very cool. Okay. What about you, Needy?
Yeah, for me, my early morning breathing routine, it kind of acts like a reminder. And at the end, I added 2 terms, let go, so which helped me stay collected through the week. So I think that worked for me for this week.
Very good. All right. What about you, Nilima?
Yeah, like I to be honest, I haven't used a lot of this. The only reminder I can use for me is like alarm, like 2 or 3 times. So I have to find a good way to think in this direction, like how to use it. Yeah, as a reminder, because I don't do any like breathing techniques or like finding a spot where I can remind myself of reminder. So I have no idea how to include. I haven't included that yet for myself or my students. I'm still thinking how best I can include it. So I will get ideas from all of you and try to do that.
Yeah, and I feel like 'cause this was something I was thinking about this week, was like, man, I wish we'd done assumptions and limiting beliefs and perspectives first, because then all those things lead into like gaining a powerful perspective that you can then use to set a reminder. So so I definitely think that as we dig into like this week and next week, maybe there'll be some things that stick out to you, like, oh, I want that perspective.
Yeah, I think I just need to process a bit more to find the right reminder setting and how to use it with my students.
Right. Yeah, because I think in order for a reminder to be really helpful, it has to be meaningful. And
exactly.
And a lot of this coaching around assumptions, limiting beliefs, perspective, I feel like digs into that portion where you're like, oh, I want to hold on to this. I want to be reminded of this. And then you're like, okay, here's a couple different ways we could do that. So that's okay to keep chewing on it.
Yeah. And you all give awesome ideas, so I'm looking forward to it.
Cool. Thank you for sharing, Nilima.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, Andrea, we're checking in just how you're doing. Any thoughts about reminders of your week? Are you up for sharing?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. I really wasn't able to use the reminders. I don't know. I guess it just didn't leave its mark somehow. I could see it in the future, but for me personally, it didn't. I don't know. I didn't find myself practicing as much. I did offer it to my client, not so much squeezing a body part or anything, but just we kind of talked through this idea of particularly when she enters an exam, she gets really anxious and stressed. So we just talked about reminding her to breathe and try to be calm and to have perspective right before she starts taking an exam. What was the other part of the check-in? I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you had any like follow-up thoughts or questions about assumptions, or I'm not about assumptions, about reminders.
Yeah, no, just I had a really great session with my client. It's really like we're really forming a close alliance. So we talked about it briefly, but no, it just wasn't one of those things that resonated really intensely with me.
Yeah, and that's okay. That's okay. And I'm glad that I think for any of us or any of our clients, it really depends on what's going to be meaningful for them. and just like throwing it out there as an idea could be helpful, you know, but it doesn't mean like you have to do this in order to be successful. It's another tool that, you know, given the right circumstances, you know, you can pull it out and if it would be the right one for time. So,
Yeah.
And I don't know if did you get here when I was talking about how I think that assumptions, limiting beliefs, and perspectives, like the next 2 chapters, I feel like those help in kind of creating the awareness around setting reminders.
Yeah, I just heard you say that those should probably be at the beginning to sort of frame a lot of the things that we're working on. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, because especially like I feel like in perspectives especially, we'll discover really powerful perspectives, and then you're like, oh, I want to hold on to that, and then it's like, okay, well, here's some different ways you can set reminders. So just a thought. Thanks for sharing. Peace, what about you? How's it going?
Hi, I'm okay. Morning, everyone. Or afternoon or night, I don't know. I think for this week I gave up, or not gave up, but I was working on reminding myself to not doubt myself. So every time I feel I have a natural reaction to go, do you see what I mean? Or do you get it? I just try and take a deep breath and say, just shut up and accept that you said it. So that's enough. So I've been basically working on that. And it's going pretty well at the moment. I haven't done it so far. It's going pretty well. And yeah, I've been sticking to it. So it's definitely working. The deep breath is what helps me end sooner than I would have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Peace. And thanks for sharing how that is individually working for you. All right. And Khadija, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?
Good.
So last week I was talking to Peace about using a reminder, and I had told her that I was going to actually do the whole pinching thing on my hand, and then I realized that's not really going to work for me. And when I was younger, a few years back actually, I would remind myself by sometimes putting a letter that reminds you for a certain thing. For example, P for presence, or P for patience, whatever I wanted to use. And so I actually went back to that and put the letter P on my ring finger, on my right ring finger, just a little P. And so every time I would kind of go around, I would remember the word presence because I saw the P. And that actually allowed me to be a little bit more present with, with whoever I would engage in conversation with. And not only just conversation, but also where whatever situation I was dealing with, just allow myself to be more present. Mm-hmm. And not kind of like, oh God, here I am again.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, that was pretty good though, because I actually realized that really that helped me a lot, because I tend to forget, obviously. I mean, many of us probably tend to forget about certain things, and so especially presence. And so that was a good reminder for me. So I think I'm going to do that with other things that hopefully I'll be able to get to in the near future.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm glad that it's something that's working well for your life, and you're seeing some results.
Yes, definitely.
Very cool. What about you, Nick?
So I think I would probably echo what I think Andrea was saying. I think as a tool for the past week, this hasn't really resonated with me. Some other things we've talked about and some other things we've discussed. So I've really just tried to really reflect on it and figure out why it's not resonating, but also how I can potentially use it more with students I work with, because I can see the value in it. It's just not really resonating with me at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And sometimes it's just something that has to be the right time to pull out and the right client.
Right.
And I definitely would encourage you guys to it doesn't mean it has to be a physical pinching your hand. I think, even Khadijah, what you're saying, like a word, or, Paul, you like paintings that have reminded you of a perspective or a mindset, there's so many different things that someone could do. And approaching it that way, it's not like it has to be this or else you're not doing it right.
Right. And I think for me, I think it comes across as one of the more abstract things we've talked about so far. So I think it's a little bit more difficult for me to wrap my brain around it right now, but I definitely am reflecting on it.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Well, all of you, let me know if you have any questions or thoughts as, we continue to think about reminders. And I know there was a lot of the science side of it. But just know that, it doesn't mean it has to be a certain way. It could be very much personalized to the client, to the student. But I'm excited to get into assumptions and limiting beliefs today. This is such a cool chapter and leads into perspectives, which is another really cool chapter. So excited to dig into this. And I don't know, just one more comment on reminders. I was thinking this week, because I didn't set a reminder for myself. I didn't think I was bouncing between last week. But I was thinking, what if every time the baby kicked or something, I had a certain reminder? I was that would be really cool. That would do that. I would do something all the time because he's super active. So I don't know. That's something I'm thinking about. What do I want to think of? Mostly I've been thinking of, oh man, it's March. June's coming fast. But I'm still thinking about that for myself. Just because that's a physical reminder. Were you going to say something, Paul?
Let me just speak from an artist's perspective a second, because when you look at how much of life is manufactured and codified on every piece of media we're bombarded by, it's really important for us to somehow in our lives take a step back and do some of that codifying for ourselves. And before we move on from anchors and dropping them, I just thought I'd drop that about, having some interesting seed kind of idea that pulls you forth is a lot, I think, of what we're hearing in different ways in this kind of work that we're doing. I can't think of an idea. I mean, the whole vision things were done. At any time we codified the kind of learning styles, or it just seems like we try to get to essential truths. And this is another one, but it's codified for that intent and motivation and purposeful progression kind of thinking. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can think of a reminder as kind of like a fill up, like a fuel stop almost, to get you on your way. Yeah. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, Paul. All right. Well, assumptions and limiting beliefs. So I know that in some ways it could seem like these are they're very similar. These two things are similar. And especially perspective. Perspective is mentioned in the chapter, assumptions, limiting beliefs. So an assumption, in terms of what we're looking at, is something that is accepted as true or is certain to happen without any proof at all. So there's no proof with an assumption. A belief, so whether, an empowering belief or a limiting belief, it's something that is accepted as true or something that is and exists. And so there is some substance there. There's some truth there. And, perspectives, they do really add to, either assumptions or beliefs, but that's more of a perspective is your lens, how you see something. So it's, really your point of view or a point of view, or a particular attitude. So really you could look you could have a different perspective in looking at an assumption or a limiting belief. So that's how you see something, kind of like, I always think of a lens, like changing a lens, changing your filter, you can see it differently. Assumption, no truth, but it's accepted as truth, and in belief, there is truth. There is something that would contribute to that. Like, if, for example, a student's never has taken any history in their life and they're believing, I'm going to be really bad at it. That's an assumption, right? Because they have no background, they have no proof. Whereas if they failed 2 history classes and they're like, I don't think I'm going to do very good, there might be some truth to that. It might be a limiting belief because it's not empowering them, but it is a belief. There is some truth to that. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So in thinking about assumptions, limiting beliefs, there's just a lot of power in thinking about these exercises and going through them with the client, because I think a lot of times we're not aware of the assumptions that we're making. We see the kind of the fruit of the perspective and action, which is the evidence that come out of that. But a lot of times we're not thinking, oh, I'm assuming this. Usually it takes some awareness on our parts to really see what assumptions we're making. And what's really cool about this assumptions exercise, which is the flow chart with, it says it's assumptions, perspective, action, evidence, which is really cool, is because you can, if someone has a negative assumption, taking them through the cycle of like, okay, well, how are you looking at that? What is based on that assumption, what's that perspective that comes out of that? And then, okay, what action do you take? What happens as you act out of that perspective? And then what's the evidence? And you can kind of see how it all interacts together and keeps the negative flow going. But then you can see, okay, here's the power of if you choose to assume something positive. So going back to that student, instead of, assuming they were going to do bad on something, like, okay, yes, I'm going to assume that, this is going to be a good experience. I'm going to choose to assume that. Then you can see what perspective comes out of it. Maybe they're going to, try hard. They're going to be focused. They're not going to easily give up. And the action that comes out of that is that, they're making progress. They're, they're not feeling stuck. I mean, there could be so many different options for that. And then the evidence maybe is like, oh, I am doing okay. Like, I am passing this class. Okay, then that supports the original, like, positive assumption. So in taking someone through a negative cycle, something that they're struggling with, like a situation, like finding out what they're believing, and asking, is there any truth to that? What proof do you have? And then taking them through this cycle, and then separate piece of paper, like letting them see what happens and how, really, I feel like there's a lot of, self-fulfilling prophecy in this. Like, you will prove what you believe. And, or, really what you assume, because what you assume really shapes what you believe to be true. So it's really helpful to not blend these two cycles together. Like, just make sure that, okay, here's your original assumption. We're going to go through it as if you're in that assumption, in the leading perspective the whole time. Because if you mix it up, it doesn't make it as powerful. But I always find that sometimes in the middle of this, students realize, oh, I'm really being negative. This is not getting me anywhere. And they'll start to switch, and just encourage them, like, okay, well, let's get the complete picture so you can see how different it is when we look at it in a different way. And they can really lead to change in thinking, perspective change, and really different results. So it's really cool. Do you guys have any questions about the assumptions exercise? Okay. So there is steps to that right after the chart. or the little picture there. I do want to talk about the busting limiting beliefs. So this one is more of, picking an area of life and having, just having the client brainstorm the beliefs that they have about him or herself in each topic. And then having them like physically circle the things that are actually helpful, and then crossing out the ones that are limiting. Which ones are holding you back? And then having them write a new empowering belief and then asking them, how is that true? So it's almost similar in the assumptions exercise, whereas like beliefs, it's like something that actually has some truth versus an assumption that doesn't. So the busting limiting beliefs doesn't like have like a flow chart. It's more of like an exercise you do in paper. But it's so good. I think the theme of this is just really awareness of what they're believing, what they're assuming, and how they can act out of that. And then how in turn that will impact their life and the results that they get in those different areas. So any thoughts on these two exercises?
I think it's kind of interesting. It didn't come up, but it's come up. There's a book called The Four Agreements, and it's sort of a guide to how to live your life. And one of the four agreements is don't make assumptions. And I was kind of surprised. Maybe I just missed it, that just not making assumptions doesn't really come up here. It's like, just making a comparison between, positive and negative assumptions, and how, I guess that's what maybe the busting the limiting beliefs really is about, not making assumptions. So, I don't know. I think that's something that I'm thinking about. I would want to share with students, is just not being aware of what your assumptions are and not making them, versus necessarily, making a positive assumption that may not be true.
Right, because a positive assumption could just be like assuming the best, not hoping for the worst. But a lot of times there is truth to a situation someone's facing. I feel like most of the time it is a limiting belief.
Mm-hmm.
Assumptions, they do come up, and especially when it's an unknown. Like I feel like it's an unknown. Like, I have this thing happening 6 months from now. I have no idea what it's going to be like, and I'm assuming that this and this is going to happen. That would be assumptions exercise. But you're right, like there's so many things that are going on currently that it does like kind of tie into an assumption, but there is some truth, and that's why it's called a limiting belief. But yeah, I feel like the busting limiting beliefs is really straightforward, like just writing things down and crossing them out and then writing something new, but it's so powerful just because of the awareness. Any other thoughts on that, Stuart?
Nope.
Cool. Thanks. Anyone else? Just anything stand out to you so far?
I just had a question. Are you going to model any, for some reason the busting limiting beliefs seems really straightforward, but the negative and positive assumption chart just seems a little, I would love to see that in action. Are we doing that this class?
Yeah. So I'm going to model that one. And busting limiting beliefs is super straightforward. So it's more like, just follow the steps and write them down. So that's the one we're going to demo today, is the assumptions.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, does anyone have any other thoughts or questions before we jump into the demo today? Okay. All right. Well, who's up for being a demo client today? All right. Let's see, I know I've coached with Peace recently and Lori. And let's see. Nick, would you be up for it?
Yeah.
Cool. I can't see your faces, so I don't know what you guys are thinking. All right. Well, we're just going to go through an assumptions chart. First with a negative assumption, or, not, it doesn't have to necessarily be negative, but it's not helpful, I think is a good way to put it, not a helpful assumption. And then we're going to go through it again with a kind of the opposite one. So do you kind of understand the difference between what an assumption is and kind of the relationship between assumptions and the results?
I think so. I think so.
Okay. All right. So just think of assumptions. It's like, it's your thought. It's like unproven. There's no truth or fact.
Right.
But there is that connection between what we assume and like what happens. Kind of like, like sometimes if we assume like that something won't work, then it, ends up not working, kind of a thing. We almost prove it true. Okay. All right. So what we're looking at, Nick, is if, there's an area of your life that you feel like not going well. And you just want to kind of tell me about it, and we're going to kind of pull out what you think is the assumption. There might be quite a few assumptions, but like, for example, if we were talking to a student right now and we pulled out the sentence, okay, talking to teachers is difficult.
Right.
That is like something they were assuming. So can you think of anything that would be you'd like to look at?
I know recently, like, I've been struggling with sort of concentration and time management and procrastination, and sort of the intersection of those three things. And I think I make an assumption that that everything's not going to get done on time anyway, so I can do it whenever I can get to it, instead of sort of doing it when it needs to get done. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, it does. Has that ever been proven to be true in your life?
Normally the opposite, if I think about it, is normally true, because normally I know how important deadlines are, and so no, I don't think it. I think most of the time it's always been proven that deadlines are useful and needed.
Okay. So almost the assumption is deadlines don't matter?
That's kind of where I'm at right now. That I've kind of that I feel a little overwhelmed, and that things will get done eventually. And I think I just assume that I have all the time in the world to do these things, even though somewhere in my brain I understand there are deadlines. But I'm still making the assumption that I have all the time in the world to do these things.
So it's like it doesn't matter if you procrastinate or not.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well, Nick, are you able to grab a piece of paper or 2 pieces of paper?
Yeah, hang on just a second. Finding a pen might be a little bit harder.
No worries. Take your time.
Yeah, let me... Oh, wait, nope, I got one. I got two, actually. That was much easier than I thought it would be. Okay.
Cool. All right. So on the top left of your paper there, I want you to write the word assumption.
Okay.
And then on the bottom left, I want you to write perspective.
Okay.
Then the bottom right, action. And the top right, evidence or results.
Okay.
All right. And then you go ahead and draw an arrow from assumption to perspective.
Okay.
Then from perspective to action.
Okay.
And then action to evidence.
Okay.
All right. All right. So it sounds like you might have a couple different assumptions going on. or in regards to deadlines don't matter, or deadlines are, aren't set, or
I think one of the biggest assumptions is that deadlines are flexible. That deadlines aren't actually deadlines.
Okay. All right. So why don't you, under assumptions, go ahead and write, deadlines are flexible, or however you want to phrase that.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So now we're going to look at the perspective or the perspectives that arise from that assumption. So let's just kind of explore a couple before writing it down. So this is basically how you look at deadlines in terms, like, because of that assumption, how you view deadlines.
Okay.
So what comes to mind for you? How do you see deadlines or your to-do list in light of that?
I think it's kind of a contradictory view. Like, I view deadlines as limiting, like, as I have only this much time to do something, and so in some ways I view that as limiting. But I also tend to be something of a perfectionist, so in some ways having that limit is also useful. And I recognize the contradiction in that. But I think I have a lot of complicated feelings about deadlines right now, anyway.
Right. So it's almost like a torn perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you think of any other perspectives that arise out of that assumption?
I think it also. I'm trying to process that. I think that, like, also when I think about deadlines, I think about control, and how deadlines make me feel a sense of control. But I think right now, when I'm making the assumption that deadlines are flexible, it's almost like I'm reminding myself that control is often an illusion.
Right. So it sounds like there are a couple different perspectives in there.
Yeah.
For the sake of this exercise, which one do you feel is more dominant or would be more helpful to?
I think that first one. I think the torn perspective of the limit being comforting and a little overwhelming.
Okay. All right. So why don't you write that down? So like you can just write the word torn, or however you want to sum that up.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. And then so you're thinking a certain way. So you're assuming this about deadlines. Your perspective is you're then torn up, along with some other things there. What actions do you take out of this perspective?
I think I find myself, like, as far as actions, I think I find myself relying more on other people to, because I very much get trapped in my own head a lot. And so I think having some sort of awareness that this is the way I feel about deadlines, I try to have people around me who say this needs to be done now, or in this way, or this needs to be done in 2 days, or whatever the case may be. And so I find myself reaching out a little bit more, which is not my natural mode.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead and write that down under action, so I don't know, like, more support, or however you want to sum that up.
Okay.
And you mentioned earlier, though, also procrastination.
Yes.
Would that be another action that you take because of deadlines are flexible?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. what other things do you do out of that perspective, or that?
I think I become indecisive because I think there are so many. I think sometimes my brain tells me there are so many options. I start to overthink things, and I start to overanalyze things as well.
Right.
Yeah.
What does overanalyzing things lead to?
Indecision, which leads to me not making a decision, which leads to procrastination.
Ah. Okay. All right, so go ahead and sum that up.
Okay.
Action.
Okay. Okay.
So it's like indecision in action, or indecisive in action, or something like that. Are there any other actions that you take out of that assumption and perspective?
Nothing really comes to mind. I think we've talked about sort of the big ones that come to mind.
Okay. All right. So by those taking those actions, what are the results?
Well, I mean, the results are I tend to not really get anything meaningful done unless someone is saying, "Hey, Nick, have you done X, Y, or Z?" So it really leads to me being dependent on others to sort of help me out.
Okay. All right. So go ahead and write that down. So like increased accountability or increased dependence.
Yeah.
What else does do those actions lead to?
They lead to me being more stressed.
Mm-hmm.
Because I always feel like I have this cloud over my head of things that need to be done and things that need to be dealt with, and worry that I'm not doing everything I should be doing.
Okay. All right. So stress and worry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So go ahead and put those down.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you can think of that are results?
Not really. Nothing really other comes to mind.
Okay. All right. So I want you to just look at that chart you've created in front of you, and think of, just kind of look at especially that evidence and those results and the original assumption. How does the evidence support your original assumption?
I think in some ways that that dependence on others sometimes allows for deadlines, for me to feel like deadlines are flexible, because I always feel like I have a support system that if I screw up or if I don't meet a deadline, that that there's a system there to kind of catch that and to help me sort of get things back into place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about that stress and worry? Does that keep the cycle going of being stressed and worrying?
I think so, because I think when I feel stressed and worried, I don't really want to work on things, and so I convince myself that deadlines don't matter, and so then I don't have to think about things. And yeah.
So one last thing I want you to do is I want you to draw another arrow from results back to the assumption.
Okay.
So taking a look at that, does anything else stand out to you?
I also I guess I also sort of focus on the interplay between perspective and assumption,
Mm-hmm.
and in sort of a chicken and the egg question, which one came first, because I think sometimes deadlines have to be flexible, but deadlines are also there for a reason. And so I wonder if that torn perspective leads to me having these conflicting feelings about deadlines, or do I have this torn perspective because I think deadlines are flexible? It makes me wonder which one is truly coming first and impacting the other one more.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And usually it starts with something that you think about that turns into a perspective, like how you see something.
Sure.
So they're very connected. They're very connected. I don't think that it would have been a true assumption if you didn't have a perspective to go along with it.
Right.
But usually it's it just starts with a little thought, and then maybe you just saw things that way, but you weren't really thinking about what you had originally thought.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're very connected. Okay. All right. So now we're gonna try the same exercise. So if you want to turn your paper over and do the same thing with the paper, so assumption, perspective, action, evidence. Except this time we're gonna choose a positive assumption. So kind of just take the opposite.
Okay. So it's assumption, perspective, action, and evidence. Okay. Okay.
All right. So what would be the positive assumption of deadlines are flexible, or about deadlines?
A positive assumption about deadlines. I'm trying to decide if this is an assumption that I can make a decision, that it can come down to the wire and I can meet the deadline. Would that be an assumption? That I believe, that I assume that I can be decisive and meet the deadline when I need to? Would that be an assumption?
That sounds like it sounds like a good belief to have, but it sounds like it's probably based on some experience, like where you have gone down to the wire.
Yeah.
A positive assumption might be
I guess I just assume that assumptions are negative, and so it's a little bit harder for me to come up with a positive assumption.
I know it's kind of weird, right? Because usually it's is a no.
Right. Yeah. Because of course, the saying about what assumptions make you. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a positive.
I'm really curious, Nick. Do you see it as a bad thing having a support network with deadlines?
Do I see it? Sometimes. And I think that probably comes from prior and current experience of people slowing me down as deadlines approached. So I feel like maybe that I sometimes feel like support networks are only supportive in name and not actually in practice, and that sometimes I end up being slowed down because I'm having to wait for other people, or to hear from other people, or things like that.
Yeah. What if we went with an assumption kind of in the realm of I have so I have what I need to meet the deadline, or I am fully equipped to meet the deadline. Would that be?
Yeah. I think that, yeah.
That's kind of very different. Because it's kind of seemed like a lot was coming out with the negative cycle, was that you procrastinated, depended on other people, and kind of kept the cycle going.
Right.
So do you have that one, or can you think of something close to that?
Yeah, no, I think that I assume I have the tools to meet the deadline, or yeah.
Okay. So like I have the tools I need to meet the deadline. Or... Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So then how then do you, like, what is your perspective that comes out of, okay, I think I can, I have the things that I need. How then do you see deadlines?
I think I see deadlines as more of a natural part of a project, not as sort of a limiting end thing, but like just a part of the entire process, like just another step, and not like this big massive thing that's approaching.
Right. So almost like the perspective of like flow, like it's part of the flow of just
Right.
how to do things.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other perspectives that come to mind?
Nothing's really coming to mind at the moment.
Okay. So you want to kind of go with that flow, like the flow of a project?
Yeah.
I see it.
Yeah.
That's, I just have to say, like, doesn't that seem so different from torn to like being in the flow of something versus feeling split?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's interesting. Okay. So you're in the flow of the project, of the deadline. You're like, I got this. I have everything I need to do this. What actions would come out of that perspective?
I think maybe one of the first actions I could think of is setting realistic, obtainable sort of goals, like sort of being able to break down what I need to do to get to the deadline, and being able to break it down in a way that is user friendly, and in a way that I feel is approachable.
Okay. So really smart goals, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay. What other actions might come out of that perspective?
I think it might also, I think I said this earlier, but I tend to be a perfectionist, and I think understanding that a deadline is just another part of the project could help me let go of the desire to be perfect, the desire to try and get it exactly right, and help me understand that if I do it to the best of my ability, that the best is going to come out.
Oh. Very cool. There's whole another assumption in there. Or
yeah.
We're really at an empowering belief.
Yeah.
Okay. So go ahead and write those thoughts down under action, however you want to sum those up.
Okay.
Is there any other action that comes out of it?
Thinking, no, I think those are probably the big ones right now.
Okay. All right. Then what are the results?
I think probably the results are that I would be more likely to meet a deadline, because I think just thinking about going through this, the first time we were going through this, I think one of the things that stops me from meeting deadlines is they seem so imposing. They seem so overwhelming. And I think getting to a point where it is just a part of the process, where meeting that deadline is just part of the process, I think could make it more manageable.
Yeah. So really the results are you meet your deadline.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So go ahead and write that down under results. So Nick, comparing these two different charts we just did, which one would you rather be in?
The second one, definitely. Because it's much more positive oriented. It's much more action oriented. It seems like it's a more obtainable way of thinking about things.
Right. So, having done this, what would you like to do now?
I think I'd like to reconsider some of the things I'm working on, some of the projects I'm working on, and really figure out, how I can set better SMART goals about approaching them.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, what reminder could you set for yourself to be in that positive assumption versus the negative assumption?
I think something related. I started having this mental image of like building a house, and just how, yes, the house is sort of the deadline, but how each piece is sort of getting there, and how each piece in building the house is getting there. Mm-hmm. And how having the house or meeting the deadline is a really nice feeling. But just like a house can be changed, things can always normally be adapted, or a deadline can still be adaptable, I think.
Right, because then you're saying it goes back to like making the goal smarter itself.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you want to do maybe this week in terms of this positive assumption and thinking this way about deadlines?
I think I want to just make smarter to-do lists. I think understand what I can do in the next 48 hours versus what I can do in the next 2 weeks, and how those things differ, and how I can make sure I'm using my resources, like my time, more efficiently.
Okay. Right. Is there anything I can do to support you in that, Nick?
Remind me about my to-do list. I think that's important.
Okay. So next week you want me to ask you, hey, how did it go?
Yeah, I think so.
Down?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, any other thoughts about this exercise, Nick, as we wrap it up?
It's really good to visually put things down on paper, to make those charts and to work through them. I think that's a really useful way, for the way my brain works, I think, to kind of work through those assumptions.
Yeah, cool. And that was kind of it seemed like it was a really powerful visual at the house. Is there anything you want to do with that?
I think I kind of want to keep the idea of the house, and I don't know, because that's an interesting visual for me to use, because it's one of the things that, like, I don't really have any personal desire to like be a homeowner or have any of those things that come along with it. And so it's weird that that's what my brain would pick. I think it's a really useful image. It's one I use a lot with my students. When we talk about like going to college and putting together classes and picking classes, I talk about a house a lot. So yeah, I don't know. I think further reflection on that choice for my brain would be useful.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I'll follow up with you on that too. Just like,
okay.
I wish there was like house-shaped sticky notes or something we could write your goals on. That would be pretty cool.
Right?
Oh, very cool. Well, thanks, Nick, for being a demo client.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, everyone, any thoughts or questions on just the 2 different cycles? Sure. Okay, Laura.
Thank you. Thanks. I thought that was great when it was on the second page in the action, when he went to that a deadline is just another part of the process. I felt like that was just a shift in his thinking. It actually helped me, frankly, too, because I'm with you, Nick, on some of this stuff. I get it. I just thought that was a really cool, the way that he said that. What did you say that was? That's more of a perspective. No. I don't remember what you said in the middle of that. Oh, it's a belief, I guess, not an assumption at that point. Is that what you said, Hannah? When you said that, you said something like that. Anyways, I think that's a really good thing to have come away with just from that process. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, what do you think, Nick?
Yeah, no, I think absolutely that moment was sort of a pivotal moment, because I mean, it's one of those things that for me is so obvious. Like, obviously, reaching the deadline is part of the process, but I think I put so much emphasis on getting there that I sometimes don't think about everything that leads up to it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, it seemed like it was like a little aha moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Anyone else thoughts coming out of seeing that process?
Yeah, I think this exercise today, it also gave more clarity to setting reminders topic last week. So now the topic that was sounding very abstract last week, it's kind of making more sense now. So I agree when you said at the beginning of the class that, this, if we would have studied this topic or discussed it last week, it would have, flown more easily and made more sense. And so this was a good exercise.
Very cool. All right. Thanks, Needy. Anyone else? Anything stand out to you?
Yeah. Oops. I agree with Needy. I think it's cool that people start frame by frame processing the 2 sides of their coin or perspective on something, and see how close and yet disparate they are, and the shift. And that's exciting, because the part of dropping that anchor is dropping one that really is a shift, but an exciting shift, and something that if you recognize your perspective and some actions you can do to make it a better one, and have this whole kind of start to finish awareness of your positive progress along that, and then linking it to something, I think could give people more hope and more clarity about what they're actually wanting to change in their life. Am I making sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It definitely leads to more clarity, more awareness, which then leads to, I'm going to change this because I want to, change what you're thinking, and that changes your perspective, changes your actions, and then you get different results, which then fuels a different cycle. Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know about what you guys felt, but there was so much more I wanted to coach around. And so for this exercise, it's more like this would be a springboard. You're walking them through it, you're kind of helping them paraphrase and pick out okay, so are you meaning this, and then it gets into so much you can coach around based on that. We didn't get into that because it probably could have gone for a whole session just coaching around. When do you notice that you make this assumption? What types of deadlines make you like get into this cycle. Whereas this, there's so much more that we could have done. So just know that this in itself, like what we did was kind of just the intake and awareness. And there was some really good things that Nick gained from that, but just know that you can go even deeper and coach around that. And it's great when the person has personal, like more self-awareness, because then they can like, oh, my assumption's this, my perspective's this. But a lot of times it's kind of like digging at it a little bit. And then you can really coach around the two. So I feel like there's a lot more you could go with that. It depends on the client too. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to practice sessions, breakout sessions together. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording. All right, guys. All right, so let's go around the room. So we have 11 minutes left here. And just share a quick takeaway about assumptions and limiting beliefs from tonight. All right, so we're gonna round the room, share your takeaway from tonight.
Hey, Hannah.
Hey.
Okay, so Nalima was my partner tonight, and it's really, I enjoyed this exercise because what I realized was like sometimes as we talk and coach one another, like we just learn to unfold and uncover things that we don't even realize. So with this negative assumptions, like Nalima and I, both of us, we kind of realized that like one assumption led to another assumption without even realizing it, but like once we were coaching each other, then we were like, oh my God, yeah, like that's what happens, and so that's why it's important to like, keep your, make sure that your assumptions are not, negative. So that was pretty much my main takeaway for tonight.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for sharing. Nilima, what about for you?
Yeah, pretty much this, same thing like Khadija said, I couldn't even realize that, when I was talking to her, like, I had one assumption, but then we figured out I already told 3 assumptions, which is, arise from that one assumption. And I struggle a little bit on like evidence and the results you were talking about. Is it the same thing, like evidence and result, or is 2 different things?
Yeah. So the question you ask is like, what would be the results? But then those results are in turn the evidence for the whole cycle.
Okay. Yeah, just wanted to make that clear. I thought so, but I wasn't very clear. Yeah. So
yeah, because when we ask someone like, what was the evidence, that it's a little easier to say like, what happens then? What are the results? And then that's the same thing as the evidence. So.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. So it was very great exercise to have the both side of the positive assumption and the negative assumption.
Yeah. Very cool. Thank you for sharing. All right. What about you, Stuart? Oh, I'll unmute you.
I muted myself back. One of the things I think we both noticed is how many opportunities come up to explore, within the exercise. So when I was coaching Andrea, when Andrea was coaching me, it was really, we stuck with the exercise, and I was really interested. When I was coaching Andrea, I was just like, well, I really want to coach her on this. I don't want to go and do so we didn't go we sort of just stuck with the negative assumption. It didn't move on to the positive assumption. So it was really interesting, and that's something I found in a lot of my coaching with students of like, figuring out how to balance, certain concepts and curriculum sort of, and, what the client wants and needs out of the session.
Yeah.
So just learning about that, how to balance that is a process.
Yeah. And I definitely like agree with you. Like I felt that same way with Nick. Like there's so much more we could go into. But definitely go with like what your client wants to do and what's best for them, because I think the beauty of this is it can be personalized. It could be used as a springboard into something else. So yeah, great that you like did what you needed to do for your client. Andrea, how did it go for you?
Good. I think one thing that stood out for me was I was really surprised by Stuart's negative assumption. And I don't know him very well, but it's just not at all it's not my perspective of him. So I was just like, what? What are you talking about? And it was just a good reminder to me that we probably have assumptions about our clients that may or may not be true about how they perceive themselves. And so just to always be aware that there's things we don't know about the people that we're coaching, and just to be, open for whatever perspective they offer about themselves. So, so that's what
Yeah, John always says, like, have childlike curiosity. Like, what is an apple? Like, like that, like, almost like, and there's, in the 2.0 program, there's, like, ones where, like, we practice, like, playing as dumb as we can to, like, just be childlike curiosity, because there are so much that gets in the way with us sometimes, like, our own, intuitions and stuff are good. There's so many things that bring that we see, but it's so fun to like play with setting those aside.
Yeah, but I agree with Stuart. I really wanted to be like, what are you talking about? This is what I see in you. This is how I hear you in class. This is what I see. And I didn't do that, right? That's pretty good. I just allowed you to have that negative assumption about yourself. But I don't know. It was just a good reminder.
Yeah.
We all have, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it's wrong to say, would you like to hear my perspective? Like, this is how I see you showing up. What do you think about that? Like not being attached to it, but I think sharing like observations like that, if they are okay with it, I don't think that's wrong.
Okay. I'll tell you what I think next time, Stuart.
You got us all curious now.
Stuart is really articulate and he's very thoughtful, before he speaks. And so he, that's what I see in class, just a very thoughtful, articulate person. So he'll know what I mean by saying that.
Well, just say what I said. I felt like as a teacher, I'm not that good at explaining things. So that was my assumption. That then I was, we were going from there. So yeah, that was the surprising. Not to keep you all just on.
I was trying to keep client confidentiality.
I appreciate that. You could write it in an email to my parents.
Okay.
Well, thanks, guys, for sharing. Mm-hmm. All right, Paul, what about you?
I think this is a neat way to clarify the process of your thinking. And I think it takes away some of the judgmental ways that we engage kids in trying to find outcomes and solutions. Because instead of being problem focused, we're kind of organically starting with, hey, how do you look at life? And what does that lead to for you? And it's kind of most like Dr. Phil, how's that working for you? But like, what is out there in that way of your doing? And then having them go the opposite way through, kind of pulling on that one to the next assumption, perspective, action, evidence pathway. Kind of gives them one tool at a time. I can see that. Those are some actions. These are some better. So you see what I'm saying? It's sort of this sequential way out of the abyss.
Right. Like it leads to awareness, and then you're able to see, oh, I have a choice. Yeah, very cool. What did you think, Peace?
I found it really helpful. I think Paul was amazing. One thing I struggled with was being able to switch. When I look at a situation from a negative perspective, then instantly switch to a positive, it was kind of like I was literally disabled. I wasn't able to look at it in a positive way because I was too busy focusing on the negative. So it became a bit of a struggle. So I realized that even though there's, different methods of questioning and ways to get the person to realize the positive angle, I was thinking maybe if I started with the positive, would it have been easier then to look at the I don't know, but or maybe it's just my personality. But one thing I noticed was that when I think of something from one perspective, it's very hard to switch to the other. I don't know how constructive. Oh no, don't do that. I was just about to say, do you get it?
Yeah. Yeah. I get it, Peace. No, because and I think that's why there's could be so much opportunity for coaching, and you gotta really know your client, or in this case, know yourself. I'm not quite ready to go there. Can I just process through this a little bit more? Because there's more there for you. There's more that you need to process and be coached through probably before you're ready. But it is a good process in almost forcing yourself, okay, what's the exact opposite of that way of thinking? And almost just making yourself go through it can be beneficial too.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thanks, Peace. What about you, Lori?
Found I was a little opposite of Peace, I kind of think, because as we were doing the negative assumption, is when we got to the action part is where I had kind of a breakthrough visual that kind of just put everything in perspective for me. That's going to be like an anchor. And so when we did the positive, it was almost kind of going through the motions, because I'm I already got what I needed to get from this, and it was really cool. The thing I really like is looking at, seeing it, writing it all down is great. But when John said, from our assumptions, we want to be right. So that's why we end up doing things that kind of try to prove our assumptions, even if they're not good for us. I'd never heard anything said like that. And when I look at the action step, or the actions that in a negative assumption, one is procrastinating or trying to ignore, I would only focus on the what I would see as a flaw in myself. Okay, that's something I do which I shouldn't be doing, and should. And this, to see it go backwards, almost like what Paul said, but in reverse, for me to look at this page and go, oh, that's what I do, but this is where it comes from. I don't know. It's very, very cool. I think that this has a lot of helpful stuff to it. I really do.
Yeah, cool.
But I have a visual, so that was, I feel like I was able to do, one of those, I guess it's a reminder thing. So I see how, these tools that we're getting can be used in the middle of the process, which is neat. It's starting to make more sense.
Yeah, very cool. Thanks, Lori. All right, what about you, Nick?
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to still process. So I think, I think one of the things that really kind of stood out to me as we were doing this, because Lori and I, we were going through, we went through negative assumption and then positive assumption. And it sort of just stood out to me that sometimes there are overlapping things that come up, or overlapping, like we were talking about reminders and ways that like things we can visualize to sort of work with the assumptions. And we sort of came up with some of the same imagery for dealing with both, and sort of how they can both be deployed depending on what the circumstances call for.
Yeah, it can definitely be personalized, blended. It's it's something that you can just use as a springboard into something else for sure. Thanks, Nick.
Absolutely.
What about you, Needy?
Yeah, what I found interesting was to see how a shift in perspective can really change everything, and how the assumptions actually do become the self-fulfilling prophecy, as seen by through the evidence and results. And but I also feel that one set or being in one side is our default. So so then looking at the other side, it's like stepping out of our comfort zone. So I don't know how to put that into practice. I mean, it'll require a lot of intentionality, and so so a lot of support would be needed, and a lot of accountability to really see that shift in perspective play out. So yeah, it was interesting. And but the shift happening, how easy or how difficult that might be is the question, and it is difficult in my mind.
Yeah, and I think that's what is varies by client, varies by their situation or what the assumption is, and like for certain things it might be helpful to not go into shifting it just yet or forcing it to shift, but like helping them gain more awareness so that there is that aha moment. And it might not fit the exact like, okay, do this and this. There might be a whole different thing to go, have to go down to explore that before you get back to where they need to be.
Right, because with perspective, there's such strong emotions attached, so it's not easy to unplug and to make that switch. So yeah, spending time to really figure out that aha moment would be where all the effort would be needed.
Right, and as a coach, it's just helping them get more awareness and asking those questions about what emotions behind that. How is that impacting you? How's that going to play out, this week if you are in this perspective, and, just helping them explore more. And I think that's what, that those learning and being questions, that's what leads to more awareness, which then leads to those aha moments.
True.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Sorry we went a couple minutes over. Love listening to all your guys' thoughts. How about for this week, if you guys can take a couple minutes and do the busting limiting beliefs with yourself. So just like as if you are the client. So like write out a list of beliefs you have about yourself or about a topic, and then circle the helpful beliefs, cross out limiting beliefs, and write a new empowering belief. You don't have to share it, but I'm going to check in with you guys, like just how that went, how you felt about that process, just so we can be intentional about practicing that one too. Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. And then Needy had a really good question about the final exam. And last I heard that it was in process. They've never done like a paper final exam before. So I don't really know what it's going to look like, but I'm going to find out more details. And so if anyone else was wondering, I'm going to find out more about it, and I'll get back to you when I find out more. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. The week's almost over, and let me know if you guys need anything, have any questions, okay?
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right, bye guys. Thank you.
Everyone.